Have you ever looked at someone and thought they had nothing left to give? What if that person was carrying a blessing so powerful that an entire village would never forget their name? Today's story reminds us that kindness often returns in ways no one expects. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you enjoy inspiring African stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to African Tales Arising for more unforgettable journeys. Now, let's begin. Nestled between rolling green hills and golden fields was the quiet village of Mwadnasa. It was a place where everyone knew each other's names, shared harvests during good seasons, and helped one another through difficult times. But there was one man most villagers ignored. His name was Juma. Every morning, before the first rooster crowed, Juma would walk slowly through the village with a worn wooden walking stick and a faded cloth bag hanging from his shoulder. His clothes were patched countless times, and his sandals were barely held together by strips of old leather. People simply called him the beggar. Children laughed whenever they saw him. Some adults turned away as he passed. Others whispered that he was cursed because misfortune seemed to follow him wherever he went. What they didn't know was that Juma had once been one of the hardest working farmers in the region. Years earlier, a terrible drought destroyed his crops. Soon after, illness claimed his wife. Without money to recover, he lost everything he owned. Yet despite all the suffering life had thrown at him, Juma never allowed bitterness to grow inside his heart. If I still have breath, he often told himself, I still have something to give. One scorching afternoon, Juma managed to receive a single piece of bread and a small bowl of beans from a kind woman at the edge of the village. It wasn't much. In fact, it was the only meal he had found all day. As he sat beneath a large baobab tree preparing to eat, he noticed an elderly traveler stumbling along the dusty road. The stranger looked exhausted. His clothes were covered in dirt. His lips were dry. He could barely stand. The old man quietly asked, My son, do you have even a little food? Juma looked down at his meal. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since the previous morning. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Then he smiled. Breaking the bread into 2 pieces, he handed the larger half to the stranger. He then pushed the bowl of stew toward him. Eat, Juma said softly. You need it more than I do. The traveler stared at him in disbelief. You don't even know me. Juma smiled again. Hunger is something I know very well. The old man finished eating with tears in his eyes. Before leaving, he thanked Juma and quietly said something unusual. Kindness never disappears. Sometimes it simply takes another road before finding its way home. Juma nodded politely, not thinking much of those words. He expected never to see the traveler again. 3 days later, the peaceful village awoke to an astonishing sight. Several black vehicles rolled slowly into the village square. Men and women dressed in elegant suits stepped out. The entire village gathered, whispering with curiosity. No one had ever seen such important visitors arrive in Mwadnasa. The village chief welcomed them nervously. One well-dressed woman unfolded an old photograph. We are looking for a man named Juma. The villagers laughed. The beggar. One man scoffed. What could anyone important want with him? The woman ignored the laughter. Instead, she smiled. Please bring him here. Moments later, Juma arrived, confused and embarrassed by the attention. The woman stepped forward. Then, to everyone's surprise, she bowed. My father asked us to find you. Juma frowned. I don't understand. The woman smiled warmly. The elderly traveler you fed 3 days ago was my father. Gasps spread through the crowd. He's the founder of one of the largest charitable organizations in the country. He often travels without revealing who he is. He believes a person's true character is revealed when they think no one is watching. The villagers stood frozen. The woman continued. My father said you gave away your only meal without expecting anything in return. He asked us to honor your kindness. She handed Juma a neatly folded document. Inside was the deed to a small farm, enough money to rebuild his life, and an offer to manage a new community agricultural project that would employ dozens of local families. Silence filled the square. The same people who had mocked Juma only days before could not believe what they were witnessing. The children who used to laugh lowered their heads. Even the chief struggled to find words. But what happened next surprised everyone even more. Juma looked around the village. He could have left. He could have forgotten every insult. Instead, he smiled. I accept this gift, he said. But I have one request. The visitors listened carefully. Let this project hire widows who have no income. Give work to young people searching for hope. And help elderly villagers who can no longer farm. The visitors nodded immediately. We hoped you would say something like that. Within months, the abandoned fields outside the village were transformed into thriving farms. Young people who once dreamed of leaving found meaningful work. Families who had struggled for years finally had steady incomes. Children returned to school. The village flourished like never before. As for Juma, he never built a mansion. He never surrounded himself with luxury. Instead, he remained in his modest home, greeting everyone with the same gentle smile. Except now. People no longer called him the beggar. They called him Easy Juma, the elder whose kindness changed an entire community. Years later, visitors would ask how the village became so prosperous. The elders always answered with the same story. It all began with one hungry man who chose to share his last meal. Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured by what we own, but by what we're willing to give when we have almost nothing. A single act of compassion can change one life or an entire community. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to African Tales Arising, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring African tale. Until next time, remember, the smallest act of kindness can leave the greatest legacy.